Alright, so you want to be the strongest man in the world at the cost of your hair. Well, that is no problem. Just follow this handy dandy training guide and you will be there in no time. First up, 100 push-ups, followed by 100 sit-ups, then subscribing to the New World Review for regular anime and manga content uploaded straight into your YouTube feeds, after which you will perform 100 squats and then a short 10-kilometer run, each and every day. Good luck with your new training regime. Hello and welcome to the New World Review, your source for everything anime and manga, and today we have some sort of news, which is something I don't usually cover, but it's a pretty fascinating topic that I have many a thought on, which is that a live-action One Punch Man is apparently in the works, as reported by Variety. And as such, it now joins the sea of live-action anime adaptations in development and production, two other notable ones being One Piece and Cowboy Bebop. Although to be fair, both of those are planned to be Netflix series, while One Punch Man is being turned into a film. And that is both good and bad news, and I'll get into why in a bit, but first let's go through some of the details we know from this here article. So it opens by saying Scott Rosenberg and Jeff Pinker are set to write a live-action film adaptation of the worldwide hit manga series One Punch Man for Sony Pictures. So that's already perhaps not such a great sign for One Punch Man, and I'm talking less about the writers and more just Sony Pictures in general, because they're a very hit or miss company, and to be fair, they do produce some very enjoyable stuff, most of which I think comes from about 2 decades ago, like the original Men in Black, for example. However, at the same time, that might just be my nostalgia. But yeah, Sony is a very mixed bag lately, and they are capable of making great films, or at the very least, they are capable of funding and or distributing great films. But with One Punch Man, we are obviously heading solidly back into the superhero genre, where Sony, Into the Spider-Verse aside, has a pretty lackluster record. Now, as for the writers, they both worked on Venom, and I did not see Venom because, to be completely honest, I forgot it existed. Although looking at the Rotten Tomato ratings, that's some pretty fascinating stuff. Looks like it was almost universally critically panned, but audiences responded to it way more positively, so that's something I guess. I will always trust the audience score over the critic score. But it says to me that this here is no Oscar winner, but it was an enjoyable film, and that's fine. I think that describes Sony pretty perfectly, actually. Enjoyable, but nothing groundbreaking. And the two writers back this up completely with Scott Rosenberg's other credits, including both recent live-action Jumanji films, as well as being an uncredited writer for Ye Olde Spider-Man. Meanwhile, Jeff Pinker also did the Jumanjis, but what stands out to me is that he wrote The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is, it's not a good sign. That movie was pretty damn awful in my opinion. So look, in an ideal world, I'm not so sure that I would have given a property like One Punch Man to this particular set of creatives, being Sony and the two writers, because given their past work, it almost certainly suggests that a live-action One Punch Man will be enjoyable, but a kind of unfortunate generic film, and with a very real risk of bombing entirely. Here are some positive thoughts regarding that though. So when it comes to the Spider-Mans and everything, these writers were generally charged with crafting an original story. Yes, they were based on certain strains of comics, but it was not a straight-up adaptation. Meanwhile, I'm assuming, perhaps foolishly, that One Punch Man would be able to alleviate some of my concerns because it would be a straight-up adaptation. And I think there's a very strong argument to be made in favor of adapting everything up to and including the Boris fight within a single film, because it is a natural climax point of the series, and the story really isn't all that complicated to get to that stage comfortably, nor are the characters too numerous to handle. In fact, One Punch Man actually starts out as an incredibly simple story, although with that said, you would still need to abridge, combine, and get rid of quite a bit to make the filmic runtime. Like I could see Saitama's entire story that took that whole episode in the anime playing out over a 5-minute action scene right at the beginning of the film. Like say we begin with a brief heated battle with the subterranean race, then Saitama wakes up, defeats them in a single punch as per usual, and sets up the standard of what we're getting ourselves into, and then dedicates like 2 minutes to show how he became what he is. And I don't think that would be entirely unsatisfying. For better or worse, a character like Saitama doesn't actually need a whole lot of depth, and you can get away with a very simple explanation of who he is. In fact, simplicity and Saitama synergize together quite perfectly. The thing is though, this film still needs to stick to the original story in my opinion. I really hate the argument that is sometimes made that films, due to their medium, need to heavily adapt and almost start from scratch with properties like these because they won't translate nicely into live action or into the runtime of a feature-length film, and I hate it because it's just generally not true. And what it does is that it gives individuals a whole new level of creative freedom with the source material that they really should never have had access to. Turning certain projects into muddled messes absolutely should never have seen the light of day. Take, for example, the unrivaled masterpiece that is Dragon Ball Evolution, which basically took a lot of names from Dragon Ball and then slapped them onto characters and settings that completely removed any semblance of who they were or what they were supposed to represent. Meanwhile, what could have been done is that they just adapt the first story arc or two of Dragon Ball, except maybe Piccolo be the main villain instead of Pilaf. I mean, the groundwork was all there ready to be used, but it was rejected. It's kind of like walking down the street and deciding, this pavement isn't good enough for me. I'm going to excavate it and build my own pavement. And then when you've started building, you all of a sudden realize that you don't know the first thing about cement mixing, and you produce a very uncomfortable journey. It's also putting a lot of unnecessary burden on the writer to come up with an original story that rivals or surpasses the source material, which is a ridiculous task, especially when you already have a perfectly good story to work with. And just a fun fact here, the man who wrote the final draft of Dragon Ball Evolution, James Wong, insisted that he not be credited as the co-screenwriter, which is always very confidence-inspiring in regards to a project. You know, this film is so good that the writer did not want his name associated with it. Now, of course, Dragon Ball Evolution was a 20th Century Fox production, not Sony, but my concerns remain regardless, because I don't think that they have shown particularly great judgment as a company, nor do their writers have an inspiring body of work to draw optimism from. Now, there is another detail, being that Avi Arad and Ari Arad of Arad Productions are producing the film as well, and in particular, Avi is responsible for producing a whole slew of Marvel, Sony, and even Fox films, almost exclusively within the superhero genre. Mostly Sony and Fox though. Avi was a producer for the original Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, as well as Spider-Man Homecoming and Far From Home, but that's more or less it for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so take from that what you will. To me, it continues to reinforce the idea that One Punch Man will be a competent film, because I have no doubt that the Arad production team are absolute guns when it comes to that sort of schmick Hollywood technical feel. But at the same time, without a great script to work with, as well as a solid director, which has not been announced as of yet, all the amazing production in the world is kind of meaningless. As the old saying goes, you cannot polish a turd, or I guess you can, but it will still be a turd. That's not how the old saying goes at all. Alright though, so what else do we have here? Hugely popular both in Japan and around the world, One Punch Man follows the story of Saitama, a superhero who can defeat any opponent with a single punch, that seeks to find a worthy opponent after growing bored by a lack of challenges in his fight against evil. Created in 2009 by Japanese artist One as a webcomic, One Punch Man quickly went viral. In 2012, it was then published on Shueisha's Young Jump Next with illustrations by Yusuke Murata, along with One. The series saw worldwide sales of over 30 million copies. When the English edition, published by Viz Media, debuted in the US in 2015, first and second volumes made the New York Times bestsellers list, and it was even nominated for an Eisner and Harvey Award. Since then, the popularity of One Punch Man has led to a critically acclaimed anime TV series, as well as a video and mobile game. Alright, so nothing too interesting there, just some fun fluff about the history of One Punch Man. But you know what's kind of interesting about this? They don't mention anything about One being involved in this process in any way, just that he created the original manga. And I point this out because in another live action adaptation that I'm following fairly closely, which I do primarily because I have a whole channel dedicated to discussing One Piece. However, when that was announced, it was done so by stating that the author of One Piece, Eiichiro Oda, would be overseeing production of the series. And in fact, the official announcement was made by Oda himself, which for all of my concerns about a live action One Piece is actually kind of comforting. And it's because whenever Oda has a primary role in other One Piece media like the recent films, they've all actually turned out pretty damn well. And there is no doubt in my mind that it's because he is present and adding that authentic touch to the process, as well as, you know, keeping people in line and making sure that they don't go insane with his characters and his story. But that is a very rare situation for adaptations. Generally, a studio will buy the rights to a series and then that's that. Deal done. The original creator will never have any creative input into a live action adaptation, and that's where I feel a whole ton of them fail, especially in the anime realm. So if there was one thing I would be looking for in the future, it would be some kind of confirmation regarding One's involvement, at least to some kind of consultant, because there is no one who knows these characters in this world better. That does of course assume quite a bit. I mean, there's every chance that One would not want to be involved, but for me that's just another red flags in an ever-increasing sea of other red flags for One Punch Man. Insiders say Sony is very high on the property given its popularity and the possibility of adding another franchise to the pipeline. And there you have probably the most Hollywood statement I've ever heard, because it opens the window on this entire scenario, and it shouldn't be too surprising because filmmaking is a business like any other, but yes, this is effectively just a cash grab. The excitement is all around snagging a property that is already popular and extracting some money by selling it yourself, and turning it into a potential franchise, because Sony is all about trying and often failing to start up new franchises. Good news though, I guess, because if Sony understands and values One Punch Man, then it should command a significant amount of attention and resources, and thus, once again, turn into what I would say is nothing less than a competent film. I just personally don't think it has the potential to be anything more than that at this stage, not with these details. But that's enough pessimism, because here's the deal here. One Punch Man has its moments of superb drama, but it is not by and large, you know, a super serious story. In fact, it may well be a perfect anime series for a company like Sony to poach, because a huge part of the One Punch Man charm is its almost parody-like take on the world of superheroes and supervillains, which does at least least give these creatives license to be a bit weird, because the series itself doesn't take its events overly seriously, not for the most part anyway. And even though, once again, this was not a Sony film, but I'm still thinking kind of Deadpool vibes. A great comedy piece with flares of well-implemented action and a surprisingly deep emotional core underneath it all. There's no denying it can be done, and One Punch Man is a prime candidate to receive that sort of treatment. And with the few details we know, I actually feel much more positive about a live-action One Punch Man than most other projects we know of. Like the live-action Akira film, I mean, what even happened to that? Is that still a thing? Last I remember hearing about it was that it was supposed to be directed by Taika Waititi, like at one stage anyway, which would have been kind of cool. But then again, Akira is just the polar opposite of One Punch Man. It requires such a commitment to bring to life, and you can't take it as casually as you may be able to handle One Punch Man. In any case, I'm going on a bit of a tangent again, but that is what we know so far. Right now, I don't think it's anything to be too excited about, but it's not necessarily cause for despair either. But what do you guys think? Please do leave your thoughts in the comments below, or even join my Discord server. And if you're keen for some more anime and manga content, then please do go and check out some of my other videos, or even subscribe to the channel for regular anime and manga business delivered straight into your YouTube feed. But for now, this has been the New World Review, and I'll see you next time.